Hello and good morning, friends. Welcome to the CEC-UGC live lecture. Dear friends, as we are pleased to announce you that we have started a very new series on human resource management, and so far we have conducted 2 lectures under this series. We have uploaded the lectures for you on YouTube. We hope that you might have liked those lectures. Please give your feedback if you have liked the lectures. Dear friends, this is the 3rd lecture, and today we would be specifically going to talk on human resource planning. Quantitative and qualitative dimensions are the areas which we are going to cover, and for this discussion we have once again within our studios Dr. Namita Rajput. Dr. Namita Rajput is Associate Professor in Department of Commerce, Sri Aurobindo College, University of Delhi. Dear friends, Dr. Namita Rajput has immense experience. She has authored numerous books. Many of her articles have been published in various reputed journals. I hope that her immense experience would help us out in understanding the very topic today, that is human resource planning, quantitative and qualitative dimensions. So without wasting any time, I would like to welcome our guest, Dr. Namita Rajput. Hello,
Thank you, Gitika. So today's lecture I will be highlighting on the human resource planning. Human resources, which are also called as an employee, workforce, personal people, etc., and are regarded as the quantitative and the qualitative measurement of the workforce required in an organization, and planning in relation to human resources may be regarded as establishing objectives to develop the human resources in line with the broad objectives of the organization. It may be expressed as a process by which the management ensures the right number and the right kind of people at the right place at the right time, doing the right things for which they are suited for achieving the organizational goals. So basically, human resource management planning centers around how many people do we need in an organization. Basically, the calculation when you talk about the human resources to be employed in an organization involves a lot of cost for the organization, because they have to be on the payrolls. Then you have to talk about their salary, their compensation, their extra time, the place in which they have to work, etc. So it has to be very judiciously planned, and the number should not be more and the number should not be less. Because if the surplus is there, then of course it is a cost to the organization, and if it is a deficit part, then of course it is a loss of productivity for the organization, which is of course not a good scenario for the organization. So basically, the organization planning in relation to human resources has to be very, very planned. It has to be very judicious, and a lot of efforts are needed to come on to the right calculations of the number of the people to be employed in an organization. Now let us scrutinize the definitional aspects of the human resource planning. So here we have few definitions given by the various authors. So let's concentrate on the first definition given by the Vetter. The human resource planning is the process by which the management determines how the organization should move from its current manpower position to the desired manpower position. Human resource planning is a strategy for the acquisition, utilization, improvement, and the preservation of an organization human resources. This is given by the Steiner. And then we have another definition given by Beach, which also centers around the determining and assuming that organization will have an adequate number of the qualified persons available at the proper times, performing the jobs which meets the need of the enterprise and which provides the satisfaction for the individuals involved. So if you see all the definitions aspect of the human resource planning, it is basically the judicious number which has to be present, that is in relation to their acquisition, then of course in relation to their presence in the organization, then of course the adequate number has to be stressed upon, so that they are able to achieve the organizational goals and the organizational needs are completely satisfied. So here we have a human resource slide. So basically it is referring to the human resource planning. So it is the process of analyzing and identifying the need for the availability of the human resources so that the organization can meet the objectives. So human resource planning is a process by which the organization ensures, number 1, the right people, number 2, the right capabilities, number 3, the right time, and number 4, the right place. So all the 4 R's are very important when you talk about the effective human resource planning. So the right kind of people with the requisite amount of qualifications must be present in the organization, followed by the capabilities and the skill developments they have in them, so that we are able to get use of these people and take the maximum advantage of their capabilities, which is a win-win situation for the organizations. Then we have a right time, because if we need the people now and if we defer the recruitment to the coming tomorrow or day after tomorrow or whatever, so it is again a loss for the organization. So acquisition of the people and the planning has to be in the right time also and in a right direction. Then about the right place, the people who are having a right amount of skills should be placed rightly. So if the people are fit for the finance part of it, they should not be recruited in the marketing department, and so on and so forth. So the right place has to be decided in the organization, which is again a very judicious job and a very willful attitude of the good people who are employed in the organization, so that everyone has a right place in the organization. So again, everything depends upon the planning. So this is the first step and the first direction which the people have to take in terms of the organizational goals, in achieving them and taking the organization to heights. Any wrong decision in relation to planning and any lapse in relation to planning can give a big cost to the organization, which is of course not good because of the competition which is present, because of the changing scenario we are facing, and because of the dynamism which is prevalent in the environment. Now let us see the human resource planning complete framework. So we start with the human resource planning. The first is determining the number and the type of jobs to be filled. Then you have to match the human resources available with that job. So we have 2 aspects. First, we would highlight the human resource demand, and the second is that we highlight the human resource supply. So when you talk about the human resource demand, we have basically the skills, the qualifications, the occupations, the performance and experience. Whereas if we talk about the supply, we have the numbers, skills, qualifications, occupation, performance and experience. So it is basically, it has to be very judiciously done, so that there is no lapse in the demand aspects, whereas in the supply aspects. Because any kind of a variance between the demand and supply again can give a big cost to the organization. So if it is a surplus, that is if planning is faulty and if you have more number of people present than required, then it definitely needs a corrective action. And immediately if the people who are required in the organization and you do not have those number present in the organization, it is a kind of a shortage for the organization, which is again needing a kind of a corrective action. So whether it is a surplus or it is a shortage, both needs a very important corrective action, because both are the variance. One is the positive side and the other is on the negative side. So let us now talk about if we have more people in the organization, then what particular strategies would be adopted by the corporates. They would definitely be, they would be reducing the casual workers, they would be do away with the part-time workers. Then of course they start with the early retirement schemes, because they do not want more of the cost to the organization. Then of course they start giving golden handshakes to the people. They start giving those schemes in which people are ready to take the early retirement, and they would of course reduce the working hours so that the electricity cost is optimized, and so on and so forth. So all the strategies would be centering around reducing the number of the people required in the organization, and their presence is also shortened for a while. Now let us now talk about if the people are less than when it is required in the organization, then what the companies would do. So definitely they would increase the overtime, they would give more remuneration, they would give more motivation skills to the people, that if they work for more number of hours, these are the incentives which we would be offering to. Then they start recruiting more people, and probably they would, in contrary to the surplus technique, they would postpone the retirement schemes, and of course they will accelerate the training and the development program, so that more and more people are a part and the parcel of the game. Now let us talk about the human resource management planning. Human resource planning is basically a prerequisite to the acquisition of the human resources for the organization. Another requirement of acquisition of human resources is a job analysis to determine the requirement of the various jobs in the organization. So when you talk about the prerequisite of the acquisition, the planning is the preliminary thing. So planning needs where we are and where we want to go. That is, what is the current scenario of the human resources which are present there, and how many people would you be needing more in the coming future. So it tries to plug the gap. So planning is a very important strategy which is the basis for acquiring the people, number one, and number two, for the job analysis. That is, if we decide on X number, then of course we have to do the job analysis, because those people would be doing and be placed on a particular job. So these are the two prerequisites, of course, and the planning gives you the base. So again, the planning is a very thoughtful activity. It is a thought-provoking activity, and it envelops the not only the number of people which are required in the organization, it tries to bridges the gap of the human resources which are present in the human resource organization, and of course it basically it bridges the gap of where you are and where you want to go in terms of the number of people employed. Then the second aspect which is being highlighted here is the job analysis. Again, job analysis will depend upon the planning aspects. Now, the concept and the nature of the human resource planning. So this is a very important aspect. Number one, it aims at ascertaining the human resources needs both in number and in kind. So first I would like to explain this point, that is, the human resource planning not only tells us the number, but it also gives stresses on which kind of people we need in an organization. And of course, when you talk about the kind, we also talk about, and we mainly talk about, their skills, their capabilities, their qualifications, etc. Because there are n number of posts which are present in the organization, and we are having a diverse post in the organization in terms of the job to be done by the people. Then of course, every job specification and clarifications are there to fulfill and to fill the particular job. So here we need a kind of the people which we need for, that is basically the qualification aspects and the capabilities and the skills which are present in the human resource, which are there a part and the parcel of the organization. So the second here I would be highlighting on the human resource planning. It helps in presenting the existing human resources of the organization, and analysis of the inventory of the human resource helps in ascertaining the status of the available personnel and to discover the untapped talent presently available in the organization. So basically this particular point states that here we not only talk about the number which we have, the status which is present in the human resource organization, it also helps us in ascertaining that what is the number and the kind of the people which are untapped. Because if the potentials of the people are untapped, this is a loss for the organization. And to unveil this aspect of untapped talent in the organization, the planning is a kind of a facilitator in this, and we are able to unveil the untapped talent of the organization. And of course, planning helps and gives us a base in doing this particular kind of an activity. Then the third is, it helps in determining the shortfall or the surplus of the workforce by comparing the total human needs with the present supply of the human resources. So it gives us an equilibrium between the number of the people required. They should not be more and they should not be less. So when you talk about more, it is a surplus position, and when we talk about less, it is a shortage position. So both the positions are not good for the organization. We need an optimized status in terms of the number of the people who are required in an organization. So planning helps us in attaining that particular position, which is a position of no surplus and no shortage. That is, we need a judicious number of the people which should be a part of the organization. Now again, it helps in initiation of the various kind of programs in the organization depending on demand and supply of the human resources. If the future needs exceed the present available talent, this gaps becomes the basis for the program of employment and training, and if it is the vice versa, then it becomes the basis of the program of retirement discharge. So basically, now we talk about the strategies which are the outcomes of the planning. Now planning gives us the complete scenario of the number of people which are there in the organization, which is the judicious number which should be present in the organization, and it gives us a position of no shortage and no surplus in the organization. So after doing a scrutiny and the deep analysis of the people which are required in the organization, we now come on to the strategies part of it, that the planning helps us in coming onto a position of no surplus and no shortage. So by this we are able to derive a kind of a strategy that if the people are less, so we recruit more people. If the people are more, then we retrench people. So both these are retirement and a kind of a motivational and training and development strategies. If you do not want to employ more people and you want the present workforce to be more qualified and enhanced, so you will initiate the program of training and development, so on and so forth. And if you want the people to be out of the organization because the kind of the position which we see is a surplus, then of course we implement the strategies of the retirement and the discharge, because this is a right kind of a decision which we talk about in the present scenario, because everybody is having a very kind of important knowledge in terms of the internet and communication technologies. So they give you a wide variety of knowledge on a click of a button. So everyone today is very smart, dynamic, and they know every kind of information which is available on a click of a button. So whatever programs we are going to implement in terms of the human resource planning, it also becomes easier. And if you want to know about the position of the competitive firm, also we are having a right kind of information which will be in the public domain. So next is your effective human resource planning is the basis of acquisition, utilization, improvement and preservation of the organizational human resources. So if we do this planning very well, it not only tells us that how many people we want to acquire, it also tells about how we can utilize them, how we can improve their talents, how we can develop their skills and capabilities, and of course how we can able to preserve them. That is, we want to reduce the labor turnover. So all these things, the facilitator is a planning, and planning of course has to be very again judiciously done, keeping into consideration the various parameters and horizons and dimensions. So the more broader the spectrum of the planning is, the less would be the faults of the organization in terms of the human resource planning, because it is ultimately the human resources which is a big thing for the organization, and it is going to convert the raw material into the finished product. So whatever has to be done by the human resources. So the planning of which again is very the nucleus point of the organization, and it is the pulse of the organization. So let us now talk about certain objectives of the human resource planning. That is, why are we engaged in a kind of a planning of the human resources. So first is the forecasting human resource requirements. The human resource planning is necessary to establish the future needs of the human resource in an organization. That is, how many people do you need in an organization, and its absence, it will be difficult for the organization to have the right mix of the people. The prime role of the HR personnel is to estimate the manpower requirement of the organization in the days to come, and based on such forecasting, necessary and suitable actions are initiated. So first, let us have a complete analysis of the first point, that is forecasting of the human resource requirement. Now, when you do a planning, again, there are a lot of factors which you have analyzed, there are a lot of dimensions and paradigms which you have taken a deep insights of. So after taking into consideration many factors, etc., you do the forecasting techniques with the help of some statistical tools, and all the data is inputted in that particular statistical techniques, and you have the right number in front of you, that yes, this is the kind of the people which we require in the organization, and this should be the judicious mix of the right people which we need in an organization. So it is basically a scientific technique, and there is less role of your whims and fancies in terms of how many people you are having in an organization and how many people would you be needing. So this is a kind of a forecasting technique which is more of operational research part of it, and the statistical techniques are definitely inputted into it, so that we have a judicious type of the people which we need in an organization. So let us now see the other aspects of the objectives of human resource planning. It is about the effective management of change. Human resource planning is necessary to cope up with any change or a sudden demand in terms of the human resource acquisition, retention, and development. Human resource planning helps in ensuring that the changes in the business environment are coupled with adequate and the skilled human resources. Now let us have the main explanation part of it. So when the organization wants to initiate any kind of change, So it should have a right kind of information in front of them, and definitely this is the calculation which has already been done in terms of the forecasting technique. So the human resource planning, it helps in ensuring that if the business is looking for some change in future, there should be a match of the number of people and the type of people which are required to initiate that change. The human resource planning basically facilitates any kind of a change management which is to be introduced in the coming years. The next is your realizing the organizational goals. In order to meet the expansion and other organizational activities, to realize the organizational goals, the organizational human resource planning is very essential. For example, if an information technology company bags a project which requires the technical proficiency in enterprise resource planning modules, the human resource department is responsible to initiate the proceedings to recruit employees having the proficiency in enterprise resource planning. Now, of course, when you talk about the realization of the organizational goals, which is primarily the main thing for the organization, because whatever structure we made, whatever hierarchy structure we made, whatever activities we do, there is only one head and one plan, that is, we have to achieve the organizational goals. So basically, when you talk about the human resource planning in this aspect, if the organization has some kind of plans or take up any project in which the technicians are needed in terms of having a particular skill with them, so it is now the human resource planning to analyze the kind of needs of the organization and recruit people accordingly. So if you see here the interplay of the planning and the subsequent activities here, the center is about the planning, and the planning is definitely has to be synced with the organizational goals, because if you supersede the goals, then of course the organizational goals will never be achieved, because your all other activities in relation to the acquisition of the human resources will be multiplied by 0. Because if you need X kind of people and you are recruiting Y kind of people, it is of no use for the organization. So all the kind of recruitment, selection activities, etc., would be straight synced with the organizational objective, and all the kind of planning would also be as a part and the parcel of the overall framework which the organization is looking for in the coming years. So here we talk about the developmental goals, and here we talk about the growth goals of the organization. The planning has to be synced accordingly. Definitely the organization needs, it gives a complete framework about its future activities in the coming 5 years or maybe 10 years down the line. So these various activities have to be revealed in terms of that what the organization has to do in future, what kind of vertical and horizontal integration you are looking for, and what kind of expansion goals the organization has. So accordingly, these things have to be well informed to the planning department, and the planning department would be recruiting the people accordingly. So planning has to be synced, and it has to be in tune with the overall organizational objectives of the present scenario, whereas it also has a main aspect of the future scenario as well. The other objectives of the human resource management is promoting the employees. The feedback mechanism in the human resource planning helps in formulation of the career plans of the employees as a promotional tools. The role of the human resource planning also envisage. The next is your effective utilization of the human resource. The objective of the human resource planning is to maintain and improve the organizational capacity to reach its goals by developing the appropriate strategies that will result in maximum contribution of the human resource. Then comes the optimum utilization of the human resource. The human resource planning aims to ensure the optimum utilization of the human resources in order to achieve the organizational goals effectively. Then is the employee development. Human resource planning aims to keep a check on the employees' development necessary for the achievement of the organizational goals. So when you now talk about the organizational objectives of the human resource management, it also centers around the promotion of the employees, the effective utilization of the human resources so that the cost is optimized, and whereas when you talk about again the objectives, then we have the optimization of the human resources which is available in the organization, and last but not the least, the employee development. The human resource development also centers around the development of the employee, and of course why this is how we do and the planning aspect of it. Then we have another set of objectives of the human resource planning and the management. Appropriate human resource policies must be there. Recruit certain and required personnel, minimize the labor turnover, forecast the impact of the latest technology, and determines the surplus and the shortage of the personnel. So this is also the one of the prime objective of the human resource management, that we are able to design a good appropriate human resource policies, followed by the recruitment and the retention policies of the people who are again a part of the organization. Then we have to minimize the labor turnover. That is, you have to find out that what are the factors basically to retain those people in the organization, and of course the retention strategies are most important these days, because if the labor turnover increases, it is again a cost for the organization, because the new incumbent would be engaged into knowing about the company and would take maybe a couple of months or maybe more time to be well versed with the organization. Then we would talk about his productivity and so on and so forth. So this is a kind of a the unproductive time which we spend. So it is better rather to recruit the new people and basically to reduce the labor turnover. We should center around that how we are able to retain the old manpower into the organization, and we should give them all kind of activities and all kind of basic input so that they feel happy and they are retained in that organization. So here we talk about and we determine the surplus and the shortage of the personnel, which is again the outcome of a judicious planning. Now after looking into the objectives, so there is a strong need for the human resource planning because it gives us a judicious number of the people to be employed. It helps us in minimizing the cost of the organization. It helps us in framing certain policies in terms of the recruitment, selection and the retention policies of the organization. So there is a strong need for the planning because there are certain demographic changes which are taking place. So the changing profile of the workforce in terms of age, sex, literacy, technical inputs and the social background has implications of the human resource planning, followed by the labor turnover. That is, we have to reduce the number of the people which go out of the organization. Then we have a skill shortage in this case, so we have to put in those strategies which is going to retain them in the organization, and we retain more and good trained staff in the organization. And if the organization has some expansion plans, then we have to plan the number of the people to be recruited accordingly. Then of course we have some certain technological changes which are happening very soon these days. So we have to give our staff the training and development programs, and we have to recruit those people who are actually a part and the parcel of the technological change, and they are able to cope up with the new information technologies very fast because their base is the computers and information technology. So we have to assess the future requirements also. So all these things, they are facilitated by the human resource planning. So now we have the human resource planning. So human resource planning is basically a process. It is a continuous process. And here we see the slides that we have to assess the current human resources. We have to do the demand forecasting, that is how many people do we need in an organization. We have to see how many supply is there in the organization, that is the current workforce. And we have to match the demand and supply so that the position of the surplus and the shortage is minimized, and we have a judicious number which is a part and the parcel of the organization. So the surplus should not be there and the shortage should not be there. There should be a judicious number which should be present in the organization. Thank you so much. Good morning everyone. In this particular session I would be talking about the importance, quantitative and qualitative aspects of the human resource planning. So let us straight come on to the importance of the human resource planning. It helps in assessing the manpower requirement, that is, human resource planning confirms the right number of the people which are available for continued and smooth operations of an organization, which means that the human resource planning is observed as a tool to reassure the future obtainability of the manpower to achieve the organizational activities. So basically this is the most important characteristic which we talk about, the importance of the human resource planning. Basically everything requires and centers around the human resources which are present in the organization and are on the payrolls. So their right number is very, very important. So that right number is the outcome of a good human resource planning. That is how many people you want to recruit, the right number, the right kind, the right time and the right place. So all these things are very important for the organization so that we have a judicious mix of the right number of the people which are a part of the organization. Then we help this particular planning, it helps in coping up with the changes. So human resource planning is a very essential tool that if we want to initiate any kind of change, the human resource planning is a kind of a facilitator. So let us have now a look on this. Human resource planning is a very essential tool to cope up with the changes allied with the external environmental factors. It helps in measuring the existing human resources through the human resource inventory and adjusts accordingly the varying technological, political, socio-cultural and economic factors as the future is very, very uncertain. Then we have, it helps in recruiting the talented personnels. So human resource planning basically aims to recruit and shortlist the capable personnel to fill the vacant post and the jobs. It determines the future human needs, evaluates the existing human resource inventories and lastly recruits the personnel required to perform the job to achieve the organizational goals. So basically when you talk about the importance of the human resource planning, it helps us definitely in giving us the right and the judicious mix of the forecasting of the right number of people. And not only this, if you want to initiate any kind of change, again the planning is a facilitator and then it helps in recruiting the right kind of the personnel in the organization, because everything is the outcome and the result of the optimum and the judicious planning which is done at the departmental level, at the basic level and at the organizational level. Because when you talk about the planning is done at various micro to macro levels and the planning is basically the base on the basis of which all other activities centers around. So not only this, it also helps in development of the human resources, because when you have a right kind of strategies in the front of the organization, then of course you would be recruiting the right number of the people accordingly, and then of course we have a right kind of a training and development program which helps us in developing the human resources. Because human resource planning, it gives us a complete scenario and the inventory of the people which is presently a part of the workforce. So how many people are basically required to take up the objectives of the organizational goal is the obviously a very important decision which the organization has to take. So if you are having a right number of the people which are instrumental in achieving those organizational goals, it is good enough. But yes, if you think that there is any kind of a shortfall or is there any not kind of the right number of the people which are present, then you go in for more kind of recruitment. So recruitment, selection and development are of course very, very essential part of the human resource planning. So it ensures the proper utilization of the human resources. The human resource planning makes sure that organization obtains and utilizes the manpower effectively to attain its objectives. It helps in measuring and recruiting the skillful manpower. It emphasizes on the optimum utilization of the manpower in order to minimize the total cost of production. So when you talk about the human resources and its optimum utilization of the resources, then of course the resources are optimized in this case because we are doing a planning. We know well in advance that this is the right number of the people which is to be there. Again, having a people in the organization is a big cost for the organization. So having a judicious mix also gives us the judicious cost to the organization, which is the the other way of saying that we are able to optimizing and utilizing the organizational resources and organizational aspects to the best extent. Then it reduces the uncertainties also, because planning is a kind of a tool which helps in reducing the uncertainties and reduces the kind of a cost of the organization. The human resource planning is a kind of a tool which helps in tumbling the impact of the uncertainties which can happen because of n number of reasons for the organization, maybe dynamism, maybe changes in the policies, maybe the socio-economic factors, maybe the political factors. So when you've done the planning and taking into consideration all kind of these kind of uncertainties in the scenario, then of course the planning is very extensive and the results would be better because you have taken the provision of these kind of uncertainties in advance. So overall, this is a part and the parcel of the overall strategic planning of the organization. There are so many other strategies which the organization has to make, but primarily when you talk about the planning, it is the first step which has to be taken by the organization. So let us now have a look on the part of the strategic planning. The human resource planning provides the input in strategy formulation and the process in terms of deciding whether the organization has got the right kind of human resources to carry out the given strategies, and the human resource planning is also necessary during the implementation stage in the form of deciding to make the human resource allocation decisions related to the organization structure, process and the human resources. Then we have increasing investment in the human resources. Nowadays, the companies are investing in the human assets and have realized that people add more value to the organization than the physical assets. So, skill development, job enrichment, and all methods to increase the value of the employees. So, overall importance of the human resources have been recognized and reckoned with in the present contemporary era. So, nowadays the people know that the human resources, if they are a resource, that is a lot of importance is given to them in terms of the training and development, they become a resource and they become a big asset for the organization. And of course, when you compare the other resources with the human resources can be a more kind of a value addition compared to the other kind of inputs and other kind of factors of production. So this realization that the human resources are definitely better than the other physical resources of the organization. So a lot of importance is given to them for their training and development, etc. So this is a most important strategy which is definitely a part of the human resource planning, and is the outcome of the human resource planning, that is how we have to increase the investments in the human resources, how we have to recruit new skills in the organization, how we have to train and develop them, and so on and so forth. So all these things are the offshoots of the human resource planning, and it has to incorporate the overall small strategies of the organization, because the human resource planning is a major part of the strategic planning and the strategic management of the organization. Now coming on to the limitations of the human resource planning. Since we are living in a very uncertain world, so definitely all the calculations which we do and make, they are not a comprehensive one, because you never know what is there in the future for you, what kind of changes immediately take place. Maybe we have a war situation and maybe the whole economy is seeing a downtrend in the organization, or maybe there is a global impact which has a deep spillover in our economy. So you're very uncertain about the future. So whatever strategies you have made, maybe they are not true in the present realm of the situations which are taking place. So let us now have a look on the limitations aspect of it. Although we do a lot of planning, we make a lot of strategies which definitely, and 80% of the times they work, but yes, 20% which is uncertain can happen anytime, and of course this can be a game changer as well for the organization. So the first is the uncertain future. As the future is very uncertain, it is very hard to determine the future manpower necessities of an organization. Hence, the predictions are likely to go wrong. Then of course we have inappropriate for developing economies. The human resource planning is more pertinent in those economies that face scarceness of the human manpower. In developing countries like India, human resource planning is of little backing as manpower is presently in plenty. So this is a very important highlighting point when you talk about the Indian economy. When you compare the planning of the human resources in the Indian economy, it is completely contrary to the other developed economies and the other emerging economies, because in India we have labor force which is in abundance. So we can do a lot of planning because there is no scarcity in terms of the labor. But yes, when you talk about the Western countries and the developed countries, they are capital rich countries but they are labor scarce countries. So for them the planning on the paradigms of the human resources is entirely on a different frontier, because they are already facing a scarcity of the human resources. So whatever they do, whatever they implement in the organization, it is definitely entirely different compared to the developing country like India, because of the surplus and the deficit positions of the labor force in the various economies and the varied economies. So then of course it is a very timely and costly activity, because a lot of cost is involved. You have to hire the expert people who knows the econometric and the statistical techniques and will put in a lot of efforts and muddle their head in framing the policies framework of the human resource planning. So those people who are not having a lot of money with them, so for them, and they are working at a medium level, for them the human resource planning could be a very costly activity. But when you talk about the big organizations where the working is very extreme and which is very complex, for them definitely this is a kind of an activity which is very essential and which is inevitable also. Then of course it is not suitable for all types of organization. When you are working at a very small level, so an individual can do all kind of a field work and all kind of planning on their own. So they need not hire any kind of an expert, and any kind of statistical technique and econometric technique could not be very important for them, because the work and the level is very, very low. But as and when the level grows, the complexities from simplicity to complexity grows, and when the number of the people employed from small level to medium and to large level is concerned, it also grows. Then there is a strong need for the human resource planning, and that too very at a very higher level, and that too at a very scientific level, because only then you can actually reap the fruits of the human resource planning. Then it is unsuitable where the skilled manpower is lacking. So human resource planning is very beneficial where the sufficient capable manpower is obtainable, and the human resource planning serves no purpose when the skilled manpower is not available at all. Then it is difficult in the organization where the labor turnover is very high. The human resource planning is difficult for the organization that have a very high labor turnover. In such organizations, assessing the manpower necessities is a struggling job which hampers the scope of the human resource planning. So here we talk about the higher labor turnover organizations. So I mean, of course there is no need for those organizations in which every now and then the labor leaves the job. So what is the fun of doing planning with such type of an organization? So that means it has to ultimately solve the complexities that why the labor is going out very frequently, rather than to do the planning aspect of it. When you do the planning that this is the right number of the people which is employed, and this is they go in for the strategies of the recruitment, retention, etc. So it is of no use because the people leave every now and then. So the solution which they are trying to find out will not be available, because those people will not be there at all. They would be leaving the organization for no reasons, or maybe for some reasons which is unknown to the organization. So primarily for those organizations, the prime thing is to find out the reasons of their leaving the organization, and they have to overall find out the solutions for the high labor turnover ratio, rather than going in for the human resource planning. So coming on to the qualitative and the quantitative dimensions of the human resource planning. The first is the qualitative dimensions. This is most important because the qualitative aspect of the human resource planning means that after determining the number of the personnel for each department in the organization, it is required to determine the nature of the job, which will further help in minimizing the acceptable qualities required by the personnel. Determining the nature of the job along with the minimum acceptable qualities of the personnel is called the job analysis. So after you have selected the number, that is how many people do you need in an organization. The next aspect is the qualitative measure, that is what kind of people will be doing what kind of a job. So basically we talk about the job analysis here in this slide. The job analysis is divided into two parts. The first is your job description and the second is your job specification. The job description, this contains the information relating to our job, and job specification talks about the physical, educational and other qualifications required by individual to perform the job. Thus it is about studying the information relating to a particular job and then the requirement by personnel to achieve the goals of the organization. Thus it is the qualitative aspect of the human resource planning, and it has been discussed in detail in the next few lectures. So now coming on to the quantitative dimensions. So when you talk about the qualitative dimensions, this was basically about the job analysis, which is again divided into two: specification and of course the basic parameters about the job and the basic parameters about what qualifications are needed in that particular doing of a job. So job analysis is basically of two types: specifications and descriptions. So coming on to the quantitative dimensions. The quantitative aspect of the human resource planning involves demand forecasting and the supply forecasting. Now, demand forecasting means estimating the future requirement of the employee, and it can be done on the basis of estimating the sales, the number of proposals the company gets, or on the basis of estimating the number of the orders the company has. In essence, this means the forecasting the requirement of the company in the near future on the basis of such assessment and taking a further action. So when you talk about the demand forecasting, it centers around, that is, how many people would you be needing in an organization. But this particular calculation is done on the basis of the scenario of the company, that is, how many contracts the company is doing, what are the future plans of the company which is there in the line of the organization, and about what is the present sales which the organization is seeing. So doing a complete assessment of the quantitative aspects, we come on to the quantitative number of the people which are required for the organization. So there are basically three methods of calculating the demand forecasting, which are as follows. The first is your statistical technique. The statistical methods may be utilized in order to find out the requirements of the company, and it is one of the most reliable sources for long range forecasting of employees, as the results are based on sampling and population. The most important of tools for the forecasting are as follows. The first is your regression analysis. It is used to estimate the future requirement of an employee on the basis of the sales, output, etc. when dependent and independent variables are related to each other. For example, the number of the employees can be dependent upon the sales turnover reached by the company. In such a case, the number of employees is the dependent variable and the sales turnover of the previous year can be taken as an independent variable. So this is basically a very important statistical technique which helps us in knowing about the right number of the people, which is a part and the parcel, or should be the part and the parcel of the future organization and the future needs of the organization. So there is a concept of a dependent variable and an independent variable, which I have explained the method in which they take few variables as independent and few as independent, and then the regression equation is solved and the outcome would be the right number of the people which should be there in the organization. Now coming on to the second method of demand forecasting, it is the Burke-Smith model. This model uses a particular equation as follows: En bracket open lag plus G bracket close 1 into X bracket close divided by Y, where En is the estimated demand of employees in N planning period, and lag is the overall turnover of the business, and G is the total growth of the business, X is the average productivity improvement, and Y is the conversion figure relating to today's overall activity to the personnel required. So this is perhaps, this particular model also gives us a judicious number of the people which should be there in the organization. So they have taken the previous year's sales, they have taken the growth into the particular equation, and there are so many parameters other which are most important and they are a part of this model. The outcome is that again we are able to find out the right number of the people which are demanded by the organization, because here we are talking about the demand forecasting methods which helps us in knowing that how many people would you need in an organization in the coming future. The third is the ratio and the trend analysis. In this method, the ratio is calculated on the basis of the past data. So, historical data here is most important in calculating the number of the people in terms of the demand forecasting of the personnels. So, future ratios are calculated on the basis of the change which is expected in the human resources. So, this is again a very good method in calculating the ratio and the trend analysis. It helps us in calculating again the demand forecasting. It's a very important demand forecasting technique and would help us in knowing about the right number of the people which are demanded in the organization. The next is your managerial judgment. So, this in the small companies generally, this method is used where the manager, thinks about the future workload and decides how many people they are needed. It can be done on a bottom up basis where the manager gives the proposal to the top manager, and also to be done on the top down basis where the top management make a forecast and give it to the department managers for review. So, I would like to highlight here this particular method, that is the managerial judgment. This is definitely a subjective method. Here all the people in the hierarchy, they give a proposal that yes, this is the future scenario and this is how we are moving on with the organization in the coming years, and everyone is giving a proposal on their own basis of their own intellect and the calculations, and everything is embedded together and given it to the top executive officer of the company. And then of course the manager in chief or the top, because we use the different nomenclatures for the different organizations. So, people who are at the top in the hierarchy would now frame that yes, after taking into consideration the proposal which they have received from the departmental levels, they will now be analyzing on their own, applying their own subjective judgment and thinking skills and intellect, that yes, this is the final number of the people which you would be needing in an organization. So, compared to the other methods which were statistical method, here this particular method is a subjective method where they put in their best efforts, their own intellect, thought process, and the reviews which have been done at the lower level, departmental level, which come up to them. They synthesize everything and then they are coming on with a symphony that yes, this is the right and the judicious number of the people which we would be needing in the coming future, because we have certain expansion plans and the growth plans. Then we have another method which is called as a workload forecasting. It means how long the operations would take and how much the labor is required. For example, the annual production of the company is 4 lakh units. The standard time required to complete the task is 2 hours, and the past records show that the workers contribute 4,000 hours per year. So, the planned manpower for the years would be 40,000, or 4 lakhs divided by 2, that is the number of hours. The number of the workers required would be 8 lakhs divided by 4,000, that is 200. So, 200 workers are needed to meet the target of X units. But due to the absenteeism and the labor turnover, 20% margin is required, which means 200 into 20% equal to 40. So, therefore, 200 plus 40, that is 240 workers are required in n number of years. So, then we have a supply forecasting method. The supply forecasting method is another quantitative aspect of the human resource planning, and it is concerned with estimating the supply of the manpower by analyzing the current resources and the future availability. For this purpose, the external supply and the internal supply of the manpower must be considered by the human resource planner. So, when you talk about the supply forecasting aspect of the quantitative aspects of the human resource planning, the supply forecasting is very, very important, because here we are not considering the present workforce but also the future workforce, the supply of the future workforce, and together we are strategizing in terms of the supply forecasting. So, then we have a simulation technique. The term simulation is used in different ways by the different people. As used here, simulation is defined as the purpose of creating a model of an existing or a proposed system in order to identify and understand those factors which control the system or predict the future behavior of the system. Almost any system which can be quantitatively described using an equation or the rules to be simulated. So, basically overall we have now talked about the demand forecasting and the supply forecasting method, which helps us in finding out and a matching between the demand and the supply of the judicious number of the people. There should not be any kind of a mismatch of the demand, and there should not be any mismatch in relation to supply. So the demand forecasting and the supply forecasting, which is the main aspect of the quantitative aspects of the human resource management, have to be very judiciously done. I mean, you can calculate in any of the methods which I have spoken, the subjective and the objective methods, which suits your need as an organization, whether you're working at a medium level, small level, or a large level. So basically, the statistical and the econometric methods are more significant, they are more important rather than the subjective methods. They should not be used because here the opinions and the whims and fancies play a vital role, whereas the results and the outcomes of those scientific and the econometric methods are more meaningful, they are more vital, and they are the present pulse of the organization, and everybody would be acceptable to change, take that kind of a change and the calculations which have been done by those softwares and the statistical methods. So we should adopt those techniques rather than the subjective techniques of the forecasting. Thank you so much.
With this note, thank you, ma'am. Thank you so very much for giving us a very, very productive session once again. And dear friends, we believe that you have liked this lecture. So we would like to tell you all that if you want to give your feedback, then you can mail us at info.cc@nic.in. Very soon, we are going to upload this lecture on YouTube for you for your easy accessibility. You can see the lecture the number of times you wanted, and afterwards, if you feel that you have any query, then you can mail us at the same ID, that is info.cc@nic.in. And we would love to solve your queries the next time when Dr. Namita Rajput visit our studio. Till then, take care, goodbye, and we would be meeting very soon. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much.